Well, the three of us are very happy to be here today. As Terry said, the reason you know why they're here, because they were in the movie. I'm here because 6 years ago, these two and the other 5 members of the Sound of Music 7 were looking for an author to tell their story about making the movie. They found me, and we did a book together, and we've been friends ever since. So here we are, and we're going to talk about the film, and I think you'll find out a lot of things that you didn't already know about the production of The Sound of Music. You know, we've just celebrated the 50th anniversary of The Sound of Music. So actually, let's start there and talk about when you were making this movie, did you have any idea that you'd be still talking about it and that people would be really interested in it 50 years later?
Not a clue.
No, I don't think anybody ever did, and I don't think anybody ever does.
No.
I think it was one of those things that until the film actually opened, nobody had any idea it would have the kind of resonance that it's continued to have for the past 50 years.
And neither did Robert Wise. He has said, you know, unfortunately he's no longer with us, but I've heard him say he just didn't even have a clue. And it's become sort of multi-generational, and its iconic status has happened because I think so many generations of people, you know, young kids all the way up to, you know, gets something out of it.
Yeah, I think there was probably no better example of that than when we were in Salzburg just about exactly a year ago, and the city of Salzburg in the country of Austria was holding their 50th anniversary, because obviously it's been an enormous source of income. 300,000 tourists a year go to Salzburg simply because of the film. And so they held a 3-day sort of symposium about the film, which culminated with a concert, a wonderful concert, in fact, that was held in the big outdoor concert hall where we filmed the concert scene in the film just before the family escapes. And I think that's where it actually comes home, when you see that concert hall was full, and it was full of people that had come from literally every country in the world. Yeah, I mean, certainly every hemisphere and every region of the world and every continent, that had all come there to be there that night, because we had us, and then they had the cast of the stage production that was on at the Landestheater in Salzburg, and then they had the real von Trapp family.
Who call us the non-Trapps.
That's right. And they live in Stowe. So, and I think actually for everyone, I mean, including for the real von Trapps, I think that was a physical representation of how, to this day, it still continues to be something that, for whatever reason, has a resonance everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to the beginning. I would love to know how you both got your roles, how you became Louisa and how you became Friedrich. How did the audition process go for each of you?
Well, for me, I was here, and I auditioned in New York. And of course, there were an awful lot of children that auditioned in New York, and I was fortunate to be cast. But I was the only one from the New York auditions that was cast, and because Angela Cartwright and I both, we were both with the William Morris Agency, and also we had both had a reasonable track record as child actors before the film. I think we were the first two cast, her from the West Coast and me from the East Coast, and we went, and I can't speak for Heather, but the one by one the others all kept joining us, and then of course the very last one was Charmian, because they took a long time picking Liesl, because it was such an important role, and she had so much more to do than the rest of us did, and had her own storyline through the film. But to answer your question, Fred, it was pretty much the way auditions work on films. You know, you first go in and meet a casting director, and then you read for a casting director, and then if you get past those hurdles, you go in and you meet the director, and you read for the director, and in this case it was the director, in my case it was Solly. It was the Saul Chaplin, the producer and musical director, and Robert Wise, the director. And then if you get through that cut, By now, you're down to kind of, what the Cubs and the Dodgers have just been through. Then you have a screen test, and a proper screen test in a sound stage with a full crew, and put down on film, and then you wait to hear. And as I say, it was a thrill when I went, and my mother, who's here, and I flew out to California, and we started rehearsals.
Do you remember at one of the final auditions, and you were there, I think, Robert Wise had narrowed it down to 14 kids, right?
Two sets of seven?
Yes, and he lined us all up. This was so nerve-wracking. He lined us all up, and then he would stand there and look at us all, and then he would take one out of one side and put that, and then take, okay, and then he'd look at us all. And then he would take somebody out and have them change places with somebody, and then they'd look at us all. And he put him next to me at one point, and at that point, Nikki was shorter than I was, and I knew that it had to go up the line, and he was supposed to be tall. And so I just made myself shrink. My knees. I was wearing a dress that was maybe a little bit below my knees, and I could just kind of will my body to be shorter. Didn't matter because they put lifts in his. Didn't they put lifts in your shoes?
They started with
and because they knew he was going to grow a lot
which
within
happened.
that year, and it grew 6 inches.
Right.
So they started out putting, and then they would, as he grew, they would take the lifts out. Am I right? They would take the lifts out of his shoes.
So were you afraid you were in the wrong group of seven?
Yes.
I just have to
Yes.
say,
Like
American
there's a
Idol,
slight caveat to this story.
What?
There was never another Friedrich. There was only one,
Okay.
which was me.
You were already. I didn't know
No,
that. At the
but
time.
there were
See?
others for the other kids.
Yes.
No, Angela and I were
Yeah.
locked into
Well, then
Brigida
that would have made
Friedrich.
me even more nervous because.
But yes, and that was just because the way it happened.
Yeah.
But I do remember there were lots of other
God.
kids coming in for
Yeah.
all the other roles.
Yeah.
Well, since we're talking about the ages of everyone, maybe that's a good time to talk about how the seven of you got along, because Kim was 5 years old, Charmian was 21, and so there's quite a range of ages, which really matters when you're kids, but not so much when you're adults. So
Right.
on the set, when you were working together, what were the relationships between the seven of you like?
Well, Charmy, of course, was very loving and everything towards all of us, but I think really wanted to be treated like an adult. I don't think she even stayed in the same hotel we stayed in.
Didn't she change hotels? to
Yes,
be
right. She wanted
without
to be
the
close
kids?
to the adults.
Yeah.
And so she was sort of in that camp, and we were, especially Angela and I were we hit it off very well. We became a duo. And that continued over the course of our lives. We all went to school together in the one-room schoolhouse at 20th Century Fox with the same teacher, all the different grades. It was like Little House on the Prairie, kind of thing. And we all got along quite well, I mean.
But it divided the way you would expect
Yeah,
it to.
exactly.
I mean, the kids who were in elementary school, which were Kimmy and Debbie,
Yeah.
they hung out, and those of us who were basically
We were
sort of in junior
middle
high,
yeah.
we were 9th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade,
Uh-huh.
Dwayne and Angela and Heather and I, we spent time together. So, I mean, it wasn't really that different than you would expect for kids anywhere.
But it wasn't like cliques,
No,
Right.
not at all.
because our families all got along together. Our mothers all got along,
And of course, you had to have your mothers
We had
with
to
you
have
because you
my
were,
mom there, yeah.
except for Charmy, you
Yeah,
were
yeah.
underage.
Yeah, we had to have a parent or a guardian, according
So,
to the law.
yes.
So, but we all would go on field trips together, and we had a teacher in Austria. Unfortunately, our teacher in LA couldn't go because I think her husband was ill or something. And so we had a teacher, another one in Austria, that went with us on location. And the wonderful thing about her was that she knew how to speak the language, and she had been there many times before and knew exactly where to take us. And so we would go to the salt mines and count it as geography for the day, or and visit the Mozart Museum, and then come back and write a report about it. And so she incorporated all the things that you want to see in the area
Right.
as part of our education.
What do you remember about your first day at work? February 1964?
February, was it February or was it
think it
January?
was-
No, it was February.
I think it was Valentine's Day.
Yeah, it was right
Yeah,
across.
yeah, I think probably, yeah.
It would
Yeah.
be, well, okay, it would have been probably a vocal rehearsal, because my memory was,
Right.
you might.
No, you're right on, because we went to school in the morning.
And then we do
School's always in the
work with
morning,
Bobby Tucker.
And
in
then
the
we would,
afternoon.
we would have lunch, and in the afternoon, we would work with our musical director, who was Bobby Tucker, and also with Pamela Genova, who focused on dialect.
Right.
They wanted that mid-Atlantic sort of dialect. There was a lot of preparation involved before we set foot on a soundstage. I mean,
Yeah.
weeks of preparation.
But as you know, Fred, being a music person, I mean, when you make a movie musical, the first thing you do is put down the album, because they have to have the soundtrack as a playback for when we then film the scene. So for kids who were not really professional singers, you know, a huge amount of work had to go into vocal coaching, because we all did all our own singing, of not only learning the songs, but getting them absolutely right.
the harmonies.
And again, in those days, it wasn't like now, where there are a lot of tricks that you can do electronically. It was just us standing in front of 7 microphones with a 90-piece orchestra and a conductor, and having to sing the song live.
Yeah, there was no auto-tuning, no sweetening. I don't-
Right.
So
you know,
to
I
answer your
was-
question, those were probably the first several weeks
Yeah.
of rehearsal. Were just doing that,
Right.
then doing choreography, then rehearsing
Mm-hmm.
scenes. So, but we had to lay the album down first before we could do anything. We couldn't even rehearse the dance numbers until they had at least
Yeah,
the
they
tracks.
choreographed around all of our own individual abilities, and I was a dancer,
Right.
he was not.
Right.
I was not. You'd never know. And then the first day of filming was the
There's a
thunderstorm
thunderstorm
scene.
one in the,
Right.
Of my favorite
My
things.
favorite things.
Yeah, that was the very
Yeah.
first, well, that was more than one
and
day.
I remember
but
everybody had a cold that week, at least I did. Angela and I had colds, you know, you can hear it when you're watching the film,
Right.
the
In your
stuffiness
voice,
in the
in your
voice,
voice.
yeah. Yeah.
What do you remember about that day? And that's
Yeah.
the days filming
Mm.
in the bedroom with Julie in bed.
Yes, I
Yeah.
remember it very clearly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was-
For one thing, it was sort of fun that the very
Yeah.
first day we filmed, everybody's in their pajamas
I know.
and nightgowns.
Yeah.
Which kind of was nice, because it gave it a sort of relaxed feeling, you know, that it's not like you were in these, you know, the formal clothes, and you're all sitting on the end of a bed. I remember being fascinated by the thunder machine.
Yeah,
You
and the
know,
rain outside.
And all the technical stuff to make lightning and rain and thunder and
Yeah.
all. I remember that being incredibly interesting, and just shooting the scene itself.
And it was fun, because it was probably maybe one of my first times on a film set, period. You know, so I wasn't aware of how things worked.
Right.
You know, there's only one camera and it keeps moving around and you have to do, you know. So it was fascinating to me to see how physically it all worked.
Really.
And then when we put it down and it took about a week to do the album, to record everything, we brought home these remember we brought home
That's
these
right.
black records.
That's right.
And we had to constantly go over and over and over it and really have it, what we just did, with the energy that we did it with, ingrained into our souls, so that when we filmed it,
Right.
we're not looking like we're lip syncing. We're singing full out along with what we already did, you know. So it had to really look like the same energy was put into
Yeah.
what we were doing as went into the recording.
I mean, obviously, all the interiors at the Von Trapp house were
We're
on the
a set.
soundstage at 20th
The minute you walk
Century
out the door, you're in Austria.
Yes,
Right.
and the interiors at the Abbey. That was also one of the very first scenes we did before we went, was the end in the graveyard, when Rolf discovers the family up in the graveyard.
That was on a soundstage.
That was, and I remember that was a 103-degree day
Oh my! And we were wearing
in
these
LA, and we
burlap
were in those
sacks.
huge, thick clothes.
You know,
They
this
had
itchy. Ugh.
every air conditioner on.
Right.
And there's a wonderful photograph that somebody took that I remember, I wish I still had it, of all the extra nuns that was taken at lunch. And they're all leaning against the wall outdoors smoking.
While they were in Salzburg, there were a lot of home movies that were filmed. I think by your mother's.
Yeah, and
you.
you can tell that it's some of them are mine because it's so jerky and amateur night, and
Because you all had 8mm?
Yeah, we got them just before we left. And of
No
course,
sound.
No sound, and, yeah.
Yes, actually, I got mine, I had my 14th birthday when I was in Salzburg. So my mother, God bless her, bought me a little UMIG Super 8 camera. So some of these, like those, were filmed on
That's
that.
from my camera. My mother was taking that.
And that's obviously when we're doing that's part of Do Re Mi sequence, and screwing around between the takes, as you'll see. Everybody focusing very well when they're actually filming, and then not
and then
focusing.
in between, it's just all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, like here.
Yeah.
These are rarely seen, so this is something that...
Yes, making fun, poking fun.
No one else took any movies of the making of the film, so the only films that exist are the ones that our families took,
Yeah,
like these.
yeah.
What about the food in Austria?
Oh, it's
Great.
delish.
Delicious.
Yeah, it's
Delicious.
Kimmy gained about, how much did she gain? About 20 pounds, this little round thing.
She wasn't small
Had
to
to
begin
roll her
with,
off the plane. when
but
we
she
got
did,
back.
yes. In fact, she gained so much weight. This is cruel, but
She's not here.
we
She
joke
can't defend herself.
We joke about it to her face that in the very final shot of the movie where Chris Plummer has Gretel on her back, Chris Plummer did one rehearsal with Kim on her back and said, "Get a lighter girl." And so they used Kimmy's stand-in, who
Yeah.
was just a little Austrian girl who was much thinner, put the dress on her. And in the actual shot in the movie, it's not Kim on his back, it's the lighter one, because he thought, I'm going to be climbing this hill 30 times today. I'm not doing it with her on my back. Well, of course, it was never, that sort of crisis was never expressed on the set, but we only found out much later that they came very close to pulling the plug and having us all go home, because I think what had originally been scheduled was something like 5 or 6 weeks of location, it turned into about 10 or 12,
Yeah.
and it was incredibly expensive for them. And it just happened to be one of the worst spring and summers Austria had ever had weather-wise, and there were some weeks where we got maybe 2 days a week that we could actually work. And
We would be in a barn somewhere up on top of a mountain, huddled, staying out of the rain, and then if a glimmer of sun came through the clouds, we would run right out there and try to get a shot.
Yeah, the opening shot of Do Re Mi
Yeah.
at the picnic was one of those where I think we'd been 3 days on that mountaintop waiting to get one shot before, and then and just to get that, just long enough for Julie to do the first few notes on the guitar. So that was how difficult it was. You can imagine for an entire sequence like Do Re Mi.
Sure.
It would took practically 6 weeks to film everything, every snippet of film in every location. So it was enormously expensive.
Well, let's talk about Charmian and pay our respects. I know thanks, Rebecca. We've got a couple photos of Charmian we'll put up. First impressions of her? What do you remember?
Oh, I thought she was so glamorous. She had 50 pairs of shoes. And I thought, who on this planet has,
She's a girl.
Yeah, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was,
decorated 3 of my houses over the years.
Because she became an
A
interior decorator.
But I thought she was just so she was so poised and so intelligent and talented, and I was just pretty much in awe of her when I first met her.
and so
On board,
beautiful.
so beautiful.
Am-
And
Astonishingly beautiful.
she didn't really know how beautiful she was. I don't
No,
think she,
well, those-
just.
And those wonderful eyes, which of
Yeah.
course you capture
And they were.
on the screen.
Robert Wise was afraid that they would be too piercing,
Right.
too bright, too blue,
Yeah, she was sort of provisionally cast. He wanted to see
he just
what
wanted to see her on film and see what that was going to be about.
her eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't want it to distract from her beautiful blue eyes, to distract from
Right.
anything else.
And she also had a wonderful sense of humor, and
Yes,
she
she
was
did.
great fun.
Yeah.
Right from the beginning. I mean, obviously, as you know, when we were kids, it was on one level, and then when we were all grown-ups, it was on another. And no, she was a wonderful person, a wonderful friend, and huge loss personally to us.
Yeah, and on so many levels. I mean, we were neighbors. We lived close to each other. Our husbands became really good friends. Her husband was our family dentist.
Before we open it up, one more thing, and that's you both ended up doing science fiction series on television
Yeah.
True.
after.
And you did an episode
I
of
did
the
an
one
episode of yours.
of mine, yeah,
Heather was in the TV version of Logan's Run,
yeah.
and
Spider-Man.
Nikki played Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man, Peter Parker,
That's right.
on CBS when there was a Spider-Man TV live-action
Yeah.
series. So what were your experiences of your respective sci-fi series?
Oh, I loved doing it. I loved the people I was working with. You know, it was great fun. You know, it was just great fun. And Gregory Harrison and I are still very good friends. So, you know, you bond with certain people, and once you're in my life, it's really difficult to get out.
No
Just so
one's
you
trying,
know.
are they?
Just so you know.
Right. I'm good with that.
Yeah. So it was just a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it. And Angela did an episode as well. I don't think I had anything to do with that. Maybe I did, but Nikki did an episode. We filmed out in the desert. Remember?
That's right.
Yeah.
I've got the picture.
Yeah.
Yes. And I loved it. I mean,
Yeah.
well, I hadn't really understood what an iconic
You're gonna back up.
character
I'm gonna have to back up.
Peter
because then I can't
Parker
see.
and Spider-Man, you know, was. I have to say, I wasn't the world's greatest comic book reader, but once I understood what a huge following Peter Parker had, the idea of being able to create the role for the first time and establish it appealed to me very much. It was somewhat odd that I was doing a Tom Stoppard play at the Mark Taper Theater in Los Angeles when the CBS executives came and saw me. To this day, I have no idea why. They saw me playing Tristan Zara, who was a Dadaist, in a play called Travesties, set in Zurich in 1917, and for some reason thought, that's the guy who ought to play Peter Parker.
Well, let's open it up. Does anyone have any questions for Heather and Nikki? Yes.
I still, when I watch it, and I've watched the movie many times, get tense at the scene, at the performance, and when you're leaving. Did you all have a sense of the power of that scene as you were filming it? Because even after seeing it multiple times, you're still sitting there rooting that they're going to get out okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I was afraid. I distinctly remember being afraid, you know, and I knew I was going to go to the commissary and have lunch that day and go home to my house and be okay. But it was just the energy, you know, and the uniforms and the aggression and the flashlights and the, you know, I do remember being actually afraid.
And again, it was just the skill of the director, really, in a way, of making all that work, because we filmed the two halves of that, you know, months apart. And as I said, it was like 103 degrees when we did the graveyard, but when we were on the stage, that's an open air theater, a bit like Wolf Trap, but in Salzburg, and it was an extremely cold. Well, it was 3 nights in a row, and we shot all night, because there was actually a show on in that theater, so we couldn't move into the theater to film until the show was over. So we worked from about 10:30 at night until dawn. So I've always thought part of what gives that scene the kind of eeriness that it's got is that everybody was so incredibly tired, and you know, you were sort of they had army cots set up in the back for the children to sleep on between each shot, and then they'd wake us up and bring us back. So there is a sense of this kind of out of body thing, and I think just the sheer cold and the difficulty of it helps make it look distressing.
Anyone else have a
Yes.
Has there ever been a point where you guys are just tired of the songs? Or, you know, like, because I know it's like if you hear it so much, you sang it so much for production and in its 50 years, it's like, oh my gosh, if I have to hear that song one more time, just sing it one more time, I'm going to just throw up. Have you ever felt that at any point?
Strangely, no.
No, I mean, it isn't all that often. I mean, but I mean, if actually watching the film is not all that often, but no.
Yeah, I know.
No, not really.
Yeah.
And also, because it's treated with such affection by so many people all over the world, you feel that it would be incredibly ungenerous to dismiss something that means a great deal to millions and millions of people around the world, and for whom it's had a personal, sometimes really quite important and significant association in their own lives. And the stories we've all been told by people who stop you and want to tell you about something particular, of either, you know, a grandmother's last wish to see it, or that they named their child after one of the characters, or, I mean, just endless, endless, endless stories. When we were doing the Oprah Winfrey Show, there was a man in the audience who came up afterwards, and he said he had returned from Vietnam with very, very severe post-traumatic syndrome, and his wife put The Sound of Music on the television every day for 6 weeks, and that's what got him out of it. So, I mean, you know, and we've heard thousands of those stories over the years. So, to answer your question, I think we all feel, who are we to be disrespectful of something that means so much to so many others?
Thank you very much for being here. Thanks to Heather and Nikki for
You're welcome.
all the information and behind-the-scenes stories.